So we start with Barcelona, Andy. Are they over their blip? And was that an understatement?
No, I think blip's probably just about right. 3 games without win in La Liga, including 2 losses and including that loss to Las Palmas at the weekend.
This happens to big clubs, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think the way we look at Barcelona on the field, it still feels as if confidence around them is quite fragile. So that little blip definitely had the potential to morph into something bigger, especially as it gave Real Madrid and Atletico the opportunity to catch up. Now, in Real Madrid, who we'll come to a little bit later because they played this midweek as well, and Atletico, you're looking at 2 quite flawed teams. Real Madrid, for reasons that we've gone over a lot in recent weeks, and Atletico because they're completely rebuilding, of course, and the perpetual question of can they change in any meaningful way under Diego Simeone, brilliant as he's been. So the sense that Barcelona had changed everything, really looked different under Hansi Flick, and flew out the traps in incredible fashion, and they kind of wasted that start because the others were catching up with them. So this game in Mallorca this week was huge. They played there Tuesday night, and it's huge for a couple of reasons. It's an away game in midweek, a long way away. Of course, you have to fly over there. Not that teams don't anyway, on most occasions in modern football, but you know. And Mallorca have been playing very well. They're on the cusp of the Champions League places. The atmosphere around Son Moix has changed since, a bit like Real Sociedad did. They sort of reconstructed and brought the stands in, so there's an even hotter atmosphere there. So for Barcelona to go there, win with great authority was absolutely huge. 5-1 in the end. And Flick took a big decision to leave Robert Lewandowski on the bench for this game as well. And his choices worked. Ferran Torres came in, very different sort of player, of course, and you know, some really good coaches have rated him as a quality centre forward going forward. I know people tend to look at him as a wide player in the past, and he fit really well. All the other ones who you would expect to make a difference made a difference. So I don't think Barcelona's problems, growing pains, issues are completely over, but it's absolutely the response that they needed this week.
Yeah, the response, Nicky, I suppose after the loss to Las Palmas, first time that Las Palmas has beaten Barcelona away from home at Barcelona's ground in 53 years.
Yeah, I slightly want to push back on this idea of a blip, and I think maybe this is just where we are with football in the 2020s. But I do feel like we've gone from a time when it used to be normal that teams didn't just win every single game to a time where as soon as there's any hint of anything not being right. And I think that what's happened to Barcelona, yes, you've just given the historical context, Dotun, and it matters, of course it does, because this is part of the stories we tell about our teams. We always beat so-and-so, we never beat the so-and-so, and having a result like that against a team that isn't competitively on the same level of Barcelona, of course it's a bad result. But I think that actually we're slightly to blame. I don't mean like us just in this studio. I mean journalists in general. We started off at the start of the season, no one was expecting Barcelona to run away with the league title. I think a lot of us had questions for Flick and what that team was going to look like. And they started really well. And so we jumped straight to the story of Barcelona is so irrepressibly wonderful, they'll never be caught. And actually what's happening is quite normal. They're a team that is heavily reliant on a 17-year-old, which is asking a lot. Also heavily reliant on, at the other end of it, I don't know Lewandowski's age at the top of it, but a striker who's certainly not in his heyday, but who is, by the way, is still performing extraordinarily, and who, if he'd taken a very presentable chance at the end of that Las Palmas game, in which they dominated possession, in which they dominated the chances, the result would not have been what it was. In a week where they had played in midweek in the Champions League and won, by the way, so this blip is interrupted by a 3-0 win in the middle of it. I think there's definitely some hyperbole there. I think that's perhaps, I put it in the 2020s, perhaps that's just always, or at least as long as I've been covering football, always been the way between Madrid and Barcelona as two cities, as much as two settings for football, and the way the media covers things there. It doesn't mean there's nothing to it. I'm not saying there's no problems to address. I'm not saying you can't ask the questions of, why didn't Lewandowski play? Why? What was wrong with the team in these games? I think that the terms we define these things in, and I even want to draw the contrast with the Premier League, just because we're recording on Thursday, and of course Liverpool didn't win a game yesterday, and I feel like all I've been reading for the last week is, Liverpool have just won the league. It's automatic now because teams don't drop points it's not real. Like that's all the fiction we tell ourselves. Good teams still have points they drop, and not everything is a crisis. And I'm not completely sold that this was ever a crisis at Barcelona. Maybe that's kind of my roundabout way of getting to that point.
I think that's fair, but I think it definitely was a blip. I think that's very different to crisis. But I think with everything that Barcelona have been through in recent years, that's where the feeling comes from, that this is bigger than it is. Now, I know what you're saying about, and I think that's absolutely true, that we expect certain teams to win every single week in modern football, which in like a large part is a knock on the health of modern football, isn't it? I think in terms of competitiveness, what this week has shown us, especially with Real Madrid losing at Athletic, as we'll come to in a bit, is the fact that this probably won't be a 90-95 point season in Spain, and that's probably better. Now, what effect does that have? Well, firstly, it means that Barcelona have really got a chance. Secondly, it means that Atletico have got a chance, especially as they're back in the space where they don't really concede goals anymore, or don't concede goals in any great volume. You know, they have statistically a better defence than anyone else. That Jan Oblak is back in great form, that they've sorted out some of those issues, and when Robin Lenormand comes back, that'll be another boost for them. They look as if they're becoming properly gnarled and tough. But to come back to Barcelona, because I know we want to talk about this game, and as I said, the way they ran away with it in the closing stages particularly was very impressive, because I think there were two stages. They had to tough out some difficult bits and then made their class really count in the final 25 minutes, half an hour. The Lamine Yamal factor is, I think, huge. It might seem obvious, but Nicky was pointing out, the difficulty of leaning on a 17-year-old. I don't really look at it like that. You're not leaning on a 17-year-old. You're leaning on Lamine Yamal. And he's so good, you can't help that. But I think the bit that really struck home how important he is the assist for Rafinha's second goal in this. Like, no other player in world football can play that. The way he sees it, the way he picks it with the outside of his foot, it is an absolutely undefendable cross. And it is a cross, the sort of pass, and it's always been with Lamine Yamal about the judgment. Exactly. The judgment in his passing should only belong to a player who's at least 10 years older than him.
I think there's like a second thread off that, which I think sometimes is under-discussed when we talk about football teams as well, which is teams being the key word there. You get dynamics within groups and players who just understand each other and get each other. And I heard Jamal talking after the game saying, Rafinha knows I like to play that ball off the outside of my boot. And look, Rafinha's actually, even in this blip, carried on absolutely fine. In fact,
11 league
fine,
goals already.
Just
amazing
ripping it up. But still, it's a very different thing as a team to know that, well, we've got this threat of Rafinha, or we've got this threat of Rafinha plus Yamal, who's coming from the other side. And I think the other thing that he wasn't sparkling brilliant in the same way as those two in this game. But the other thing that I think is really important is Dani Olmo's back as well, who scored 5 goals already this season, despite barely being there this season. And suddenly, as an opponent, you're not thinking about a threat on one side, you're thinking about a threat all the way across the attack. And
I think there's so much intrigue in this conversation. You set up the intrigue very well, Nicky, in your first answers. This has part of the intrigue of this is youth and veterans. Part of the intrigue for Barcelona, part of the intrigue is what is Real Madrid doing? Because Barcelona are often judged in comparison to their biggest rivals, Real Madrid. If they're doing well, then you think, okay, the season belongs to them. If they're not doing well, does it belong to Barcelona? And there is a question mark on that, which we'll no doubt come to in a moment. But I think with regards to the intrigue, you can't get away from the defeat at Las Palmas. Very well spotted, by the way. Nicky said Rafinha, no problem. He seemed to be firing on all guns, even when Las Palmas just seemed to have a little bit of the edge or desire more than Barcelona. But that was what caused Hansi Flick to, come out and speak about his team. He's not happy. He wasn't happy about that at all.
Yeah.
And apparently he took them to one side, not least Lewandowski, and said, look, let's talk about this, because that wasn't acceptable.
That's really significant, the fact that he took Lewandowski to one side and spoke to him and said, I expect more of you after that game against Las Palmas, because in another context, it might seem really harsh, because Lewandowski's had a brilliant season so far. He's maybe been the best centre forward in Europe so far.
One goal per game, I think he's on at the moment.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, really. That at 36 he's become this player again, and but I think it is all about context, because Hansi Flick is in such a position of strength at the moment, and the feeling is that he's managed Barcelona so well, and I don't just mean coached, I mean managed, because it is about ego balance and all that sort of stuff as well, that if Carlo Ancelotti had done that with Kylian Mbappe, particularly after he's missed 2 penalties in 3 games, because he missed one at Athletic as well. That is like story of the century. But really, I think it's a testament to the way that he's managed Lewandowski, that he's got so much out of him so far, and that he has the confidence to say, which becomes public knowledge, yeah, that wasn't good enough. I'm going to leave you on the bench for this next game. And the way Madrid are, that's a massive political minefield if that happens there. But what Hansi Flick has done so well, a little bit like Vincent Kompany at Bayern, actually, the fact that despite the fact they play very risky football, both of those teams, Bayern and Barcelona, play very, very risky football, which is very enjoyable, by the way, they've brought a strange calm to things. And so, the way that they lose to Las Palmas is, well, I don't think Barcelona were great in that game, but Cillessen came back, Jasper Cillessen, who used to belong to Barcelona but not play for them that much. He makes a load of good saves. Barcelona concede 2 goals that are beautifully constructed by Las Palmas, who are completely different gravy, by the way, since Diego Martinez has arrived there, and he's coached them very well. But it's sort of one of those things. It's a bit like Kevin Peterson getting out to a big shot. You think, well, it sort of happens, doesn't it? If you stay around,
that's what he does.
If you take those risks, it's like if you stay around the hairdressers long enough, you're going to get a haircut. The fact is, those things will happen to Barcelona. They will get undone at certain points. And the fact that Flick has managed to de-dramatise that and move on from that, I think shows how valuable he is.
Yeah, Mikey Dredd's got a song about that. A Dredd that stayed in the barber saloon a little bit too long.
Is that right?
Yeah, very good song, by the way. Forgive me.
No, the Lewandowski one's really interesting to me. I think there's 2 things, just thoughts I have in my head, and I do feel like with all of this, I'm speculating a bit, really, because there's been a lot of talk about Flick putting Lewandowski to one side, and I feel like at the end, none of us were stood there listening in on their conversation, right? We don't know exactly what was said between the 2 of them. I do think it's a thing I've certainly heard from managers before, that actually the time to give a player a kick up the bum is not when their confidence is shattered. It's when their confidence is actually not doing too badly and you can give them that kick. And I think that's why actually after 15 goals, you can give him that kick up the bum, right? It's not like he scored no goals. So it's more of the
reminder of responsibilities.
Yeah, it's not saying you're doing. I was going to use a bad word there and I won't. But it's not saying you're doing rubbish, mate. It's saying you're doing something else. It's saying buck up and do even better. I also think, are we certain this is all punitive and not just a little bit looking at your oldest player and saying,
You need a
sometimes
rest.
you need a rest, playing a lot of football at the moment. Like I think this idea that it's purely punitive might be a little bit of a misleading one. But again, that's speculation.
I suppose the bigger question is, where does, if it is a blip, and we'll find out certainly in the next week or two, where this leaves the La Liga title race? Because where you would expect Real Madrid to have capitalised on Barcelona dropping points, they go and drop points as well. So, is this a competitive league? You suggested that with the maximum amount of points that are available, but Andy, will it be a competitive La Liga season?
I think so.
Will Real Madrid pose a real threat to Barcelona? Are there any other runners or riders?
I think so, because I think when you look at this week, if you take away the context of Mallorca playing very well so far this season, if you're looking at away games for Barcelona and Madrid in the same week, you'd far rather be going to Mallorca than you would be going to Athletic. And especially the reception that Real Madrid always receive at Athletic, which is not the friendliest, is a really, really tough away game. Now, so the fact that they've fallen 3 points further behind at this moment, it's, in a different context, it would maybe feel like a pivotal week. It's not, because it's way too early in the season. And of course, we have to say is what the difference this week has made is, with Barcelona winning and Real Madrid losing, that even if Real Madrid win their game in hand, which is away at Valencia, who are obviously at quite a low point in the table at the moment, that they would not catch up to Barcelona. That's the difference. Whereas from the weekend, if Real Madrid win their game in hand, they go above Barcelona. So they're closer than you think. And like I said, I think that is really the point at the moment. The fact that Real Madrid and Atletico are closer than you think.